We go further. If these insights speak to something you've felt, consider subscribing to this channel. Here we explore the unseen corners of the human mind, and your story might help someone else feel less alone. So hit that subscribe button, and share in the comments if you ever felt expected to be the mature one too soon. It's more common than you think. Let's go deeper. The phrase "you should have known better" often disguises adult frustration with their own lack of control. It's easier to place that responsibility on the child than to face the discomfort of our own impatience. But in doing so, we teach children to take responsibility for emotions that aren't theirs. They learn that harmony depends on their behavior, that love is conditional, and that mistakes threaten connection. From a psychological standpoint, this creates what's known as toxic shame, a deep sense of defectiveness that doesn't fade with apology or success. It's the belief that no matter what you do, you'll never be enough. And the irony is that this belief often drives people to appear strong, capable, and composed, while silently fearing the moment they'll be exposed as not good enough. Now imagine this dynamic repeating over years. The child becomes the adult who overanalyzes every interaction, who replays conversations wondering if they offended someone, who stays up at night overthinking small mistakes. They become perfectionists not out of pride but out of fear. A fear born from the idea that being wrong equals being unworthy. But human development doesn't work that way. Mistakes are how we learn emotional boundaries, empathy, and resilience. When those natural lessons are replaced with shame, the child never truly learns self-compassion. And without self-compassion, healing becomes nearly impossible. Leonardo da Vinci once wrote, "Learning never exhausts the mind." But for a child expected to know better, learning becomes exhausting, because every lesson carries the risk of judgment. They stop exploring. They stop asking questions. They learn to stay small, predictable, and quiet. This compliance might look like maturity, but it's often a trauma response. In therapy, these patterns show up as difficulty asserting needs, people-pleasing, or a deep discomfort with praise. The child within them never learned that safety could exist without perfection. And when we think about emotional development, it's important to remember that children mirror the emotions of their caregivers. If an adult reacts with anger or disappointment, the child internalizes that as a reflection of their own worth. They think, if they're upset, it must be my fault. That's how guilt and shame intertwine. Over time, this shapes not only their personality but also their sense of identity. They become hyper-aware, constantly scanning for emotional cues, trying to predict reactions before they happen. It's survival disguised as empathy. But real empathy requires emotional freedom, not fear. In adulthood, this dynamic often replays in relationships. They may attract partners or friends who mirror the authority figures of their childhood. People who expect emotional labor, who say things like, "You should have known I was upset." And just like that, the old wound reopens. The cycle continues until awareness breaks it. Because awareness, unlike blame, gives us the choice to respond differently. It's the moment we realize that we were never supposed to know better, we were supposed to be taught better. This awareness brings something powerful: forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses harm, but the kind that frees you from carrying it. When you understand the psychology behind that expectation, you can start reparenting yourself. You can teach the younger version of you what no one else did, that it's okay not to know, that curiosity isn't failure, that mistakes don't make you unlovable. In cognitive behavioral terms, this is the process of restructuring internal beliefs. You replace "I should have known better" with "I'm still learning and that's enough." That single shift rewires the emotional brain. But this healing requires patience. The same patience that was missing when the child was told they should know better. Developing emotional maturity as an adult means allowing yourself to experience emotions without judgment. It means sitting with discomfort, naming it, and realizing it doesn't define you. As Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. That space is where healing begins. And if you're still watching, take a moment to reflect. How many times have you told yourself you should have known better, about relationships, about trust, about mistakes? That voice isn't wisdom, it's memory. It's the echo of childhood expectations replaying in your adult life. Recognizing that voice is the first step in quieting it. And maybe that's why you're here, to understand that you can outgrow the expectations that once defined you. So if this resonates, share it. Not just because it helps the channel, but because someone out there needs to hear that they're not broken for not knowing better. They were simply never given the space to learn. Drop your thoughts in the comments. How did this idea show up in your life? Your story might be the mirror someone else needs. And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because the journey of self-understanding isn't one we take alone, it's something we build together, one insight at a time. As we continue exploring this, remember that every time you judge yourself for not knowing better, you're reinforcing the same dynamic that once hurt you. Instead, try asking, what can I learn from this? That's where growth happens. That's how the child inside you finally gets to feel safe enough to learn, not just to survive. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate freedom. Have you ever been told, you should have known better? It sounds simple, even harmless, but for a child, those words echo in ways most adults don't fully understand. Imagine a young mind still learning what the world expects, still decoding emotions, mistakes, and boundaries, and suddenly being told they should already know how to act, how to think, how to feel. The weight of that expectation can reshape the very foundation of their inner world. It's not just disappointment they feel, it's confusion, guilt, and a silent question that burns in their chest. What's wrong with me? When adults assume understanding before development, they create an invisible pressure. One that teaches the child not to fail, not to feel, not to ask for help. This isn't discipline, it's disconnection. As Carl Jung once said, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. That burden often begins with the simple expectation of knowing better before they even know themselves. And while some children adapt by becoming overachievers, constantly seeking approval to avoid the sting of disapproval, others withdraw, internalizing the belief that love must be earned through perfection. Both responses stem from the same wound, the fear of not being enough. Psychologically, when a child is expected to know better, they begin to internalize shame instead of learning accountability. Shame says, I am bad. Accountability says, I made a mistake. That subtle difference defines the path their emotional development will take. When a parent or teacher demands emotional maturity that hasn't yet developed neurologically, it triggers a fight between the logical brain and the emotional brain. The child learns to hide emotions to avoid punishment rather than to process them. Over time, this creates a pattern of emotional suppression, a kind of inner mask. You might notice adults who can't express anger, who fear vulnerability, who say, I'm fine even when they're breaking inside. Many of them were once children expected to know better. And maybe you've met someone like that, or maybe you've been that child. Think about this. How can a child understand what they haven't yet experienced? When they spill a drink or forget a rule, it's not rebellion, it's development. But when the reaction they receive is disappointment instead of guidance, the lesson becomes, don't make mistakes, instead of learn from them. This alters the way they see themselves in relation to others. They begin to measure their worth by performance rather than authenticity. Sigmund Freud once said, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. That's what happens to the child who grows up under the constant expectation to know better. They carry those buried emotions into adulthood, sometimes without realizing where the pain began. And here's something fascinating. The child doesn't just see the adult as angry, they see themselves as the cause of the anger. The brain of a developing child is wired to attach meaning to relationships, not events. So instead of understanding that the adult's frustration might come from stress, exhaustion, or fear, they interpret it as, I disappointed them because I'm not good enough. That belief becomes the script they live by. They grow into adults who apologize even when they're not wrong, who fear rejection before connection, who analyze every word before speaking. It's not overthinking, it's overprotecting the inner child who was told to know better instead of being allowed to learn. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like you were expected to be mature before you were ready, you're not alone. Many of us carry that silent programming from childhood. We were praised for being the responsible one, the little adult, the one who doesn't cause trouble. It sounded like love, but often it was survival. We learned that being calm kept others calm, that fixing things made us valuable, that pleasing people kept us safe. But here's the truth, emotional maturity can't be forced, it has to be nurtured. And if you're realizing that now, that's part of your healing. In psychology, this expectation falls under the concept of parentification, when a child takes on emotional or practical responsibilities that belong to the parent. This could look like comforting an adult who's upset, mediating arguments, or being the voice of reason in situations they're too young to handle. It's subtle, but it teaches them to regulate others instead of themselves. As adults, these children often become caregivers in every sense, always putting others first. They're the ones who can't rest until everyone else is okay. But deep down, that constant vigilance is just a grown-up version of, I should have known better. When we explore this from a neurological perspective, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making and impulse control, doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s. Yet, children are often scolded for acting impulsively, as though they have access to adult reasoning. When they're told they should have known better, they're being asked to use a part of the brain that literally isn't ready yet. Over time, this mismatch between expectation and ability leads to chronic anxiety. The child learns to anticipate criticism, reading every room for signs of potential failure. That's not intuition, it's hypervigilance. If this resonates with you, take a moment and breathe. This is not about blaming parents, it's about understanding the psychology of expectation. Parents often repeat patterns they never examined, echoing the voices that shaped them. As the philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters." Understanding that your reactions were shaped by impossible expectations gives you the power to rewrite them. And be full.